You want to, we're on. Okay, it's 5:30. We'll call this meeting of the Public Works and Highways Department to order. Attendance shows all committee members are present. I'll entertain approval of the minutes from October 1st.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any changes or comments on the minutes? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Move on to public comment. Anybody from the audience who would like to come up and speak? I imagine you already filled out a form, so just state your name and.
I had to do this yesterday. Okay. Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. I just have two questions really. But first, congrats on the open house at the DPW. I thought it was well received. Everything looked great. It was very interesting. So hopefully our dollars will be put to good use for many years to come. I did have a question on, there was a comment that you made, Matt, a few weeks ago about the funding of the furniture. And I thought you said, or somebody said that it came out of the contingency. Is that correct? Or was it something else? Okay. All right, I was confused because it sounded like, why wouldn't it have been budgeted for originally? So there must have been some other statement. Okay, great. Last night at the Plan Commission, they brought up the whole tree program, which is great. They're starting to think about it. So I don't know if you have had an opportunity to talk to the commissioners about it. One of the things that comes up regularly that I see is where they place the street trees in relation to overhead lines. And those are, there's always or can be a conflict, especially if the trees get bigger and then the utilities have to come in and butcher them. So I don't know if that's addressed in your tree plan. They didn't seem to know, but it might be a good idea to just bring that information to Director Retzlaff's attention, because they were not clear on, they thought that it should be right underneath. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I do not have my form filled out. Is this thing on?
It's hard to hear over here. I could tell you that.
It's on.
Yeah. You're
But-
just in that
oh.
dead zone.
Okay, I'm in a dead zone. No,
Yeah, You're in that
something, I don't
place
think they have the audio on.
amplify.
But anyway, Jan Miller, W151N10297 Winsong Circle West. I wanted to talk about trees as well. I see it's on here. Item D. I didn't get to item D, but I wanted to understand if the potential tree pruning and removal project on these roads and potentially other roads were part of the tree program, A, and B, is it coming out of the 2024 or 2025 budgets? So if you could touch on that. And I was at the DPW open house and it went really well. And I saw a lot of residents and they were very impressed. So, and I did pick up my little ticket, my little shield for getting into the recycle area. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Saying there aren't any. Are our microphones on?
Yeah, we're good.
Steve is back there checking on it.
Should be red, right?
No.
No.
There you go.
Do you hear any? Do you hear anything?
Test.
Can you hear me? No, they're not.
I don't think they're on, so I'll just try to talk loud, I guess. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. There is none. New business A, approval of a professional services agreement with Rupert Melke in the amount not to exceed $20,000 for additional work on the PSC CRP report. Oh, okay. Okay, great. No, as long as people can hear if they're watching. Okay, perfect. Who has this one? You?
Me, I
Okay.
can take it. So this is Rukert and Milky continuing some services they're providing for the production of this CPR report. I've talked about this report a number of times in the past, but we're kind of behind on getting this report over to the PSC. It was something that was required of the village as part of our rate case back in 2021. And is a difficult and time-consuming report to put together. So I can see, why some of those delays existed, but we're to the point now where we really need the horsepower to get this report done and turned over to the PSC before we encounter a violation of some kind.
Committee?
So
Do you want to just summarize what's basically in the report, like in 1 minute?
the report,
So
yeah.
viewers can
The
tell.
report is a full inventory of the entire water utility, all of the assets, from valves to water mains to towers and well houses and the components in them. And it assigns a value, a historical value, for their installation cost and maintenance that you've done.
Who actually assigns the cost? Is that Rupert Melky's job or is that PSC's job or?
We assign the cost and it's supposed to align with our annual report.
Mhm.
So the difficult part for staff is going back and finding those historical costs because this dates back to the introduction of the water utility probably in the 60s or something. So finding those records is difficult and it may be impossible in some cases. So our effort is to kind of do the best we can with this report and get it close and then work with the PSC on any shortcomings that might exist.
Is this a new requirement of the PSC or was this required back in the 70s when they would have had the 1960s? And why do we have to go back that far?
That's just the nature of the reports, but we were reclassified from a Class C water utility to a Class AB water utility back in like 2001. And Class C water utilities, that's 4,000 connections or less, don't have this requirement, but AB utilities do. That's 4,000 or more connections. But they're typically, it's not like an annual thing where you send it to them. But when we had this rate case, that was probably the first instance where they realized they didn't have that on file with us and then required it as part of that rate case.
So we reached over the 4,000 connections in 2001, and yet we still have to go back
Stuff
further than
way
that.
back, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know how that's even possible. Anyway, committee? Bob?
So Matt, this, it came down to schedule. We're just behind the 8 ball on this. And your staff has the expertise to do it. It's just that you don't have enough manpower, person power to get this done in time. Is that what I'm hearing?
So that's part of it. Staff is working on a portion of it. So part of it involves a kind of a line by line update of a number of assets in the GIS system. And our engineering techs have been working on that. But when it comes to my time or Kevin's time, that's where the difficulty is encountered. And if we had a couple years notice and we were working under a normal deadline, I think we probably could have accomplished this. But now we're really right up against it.
That's why Rupert and Milky did not have this in the original scope. Because we thought we could do it.
They worked for us. They started this process a couple months ago. They worked with us on a small agreement under $7,500 and worked through that amount and need this additional amount not to exceed this $20,000 to finish the project. Part of what we're doing too is creating a system in the GIS that allows this report to be continuously maintained. And then it's just a matter of running the report whenever it's needed. So it's kind of systematized by the effort that we're going through right now.
Is that the, that June 20th report or proposal that was in there for 6,500? That was one of
Yes.
your attachments.
Yes.
So that was the original fee, but now we're giving them 20,000 additional,
Correct.
I mean, that's a huge change of scope on this thing.
It's not to exceed, but it is possible that we would need that for them.
I noticed their average rate works out to $133 an hour. That seems high to me for this type of work.
I mean, I think it's right in line with what we see for a lot of our proposals and a lot of our engineering services.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I apologize. We did this in 2021 for the rate increase, correct?
We didn't.
We didn't.
As part of the rate case with the PSC, they required that we submit this report, but we have never submitted it.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion?
I'll move approval of the professional service agreement with Rupert Milkie for an amount not to exceed $20,000 for additional work on the PSC CRP report.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to B, award of contract to J. Miller Electric in the amount of $383,255 for generator replacements at wells 2 and 7.
So this was a planned replacement project that was scheduled for 2024. The bids came in very well compared to budgetary estimates and the engineering estimate that was conducted. We're replacing generators that are very old, 28 years in the case of well 2 and 30 years in the case of well 7. Both of them, if they were to remain in service, would have a significant amount of maintenance that we would need to do in order to keep them running. And based on the age and the amount of that maintenance, it's felt that it was appropriate to do the replacement at this time. So we are looking for the award to J. Miller for that amount, and then 5% contingency for the total of $401,380.
Phil?
I'll make a motion to award the contract to J. Miller Electric in the amount of $383,255 for generator replacements for well 2 and 7, and approval of the contingency of $18,125.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Just backup generators? Just backup generators?
Yep.
Bob?
I'm not going to approve it with the 5% contingency. We've had these discussions before. I want that to be managed to the contractor's total amount without the contingency.
Just a side note, maybe we should put contingencies and how we operate with that on our general government and finance committee, just to take a look at that in general, to see if people agree with
Yeah, I think that's a good
trustee
idea.
Warren or to see how we might want to approach this in the future.
Yeah, I think there's a range of options that are available. But if we're not able to get contingencies awarded, then I think there should be other steps in place.
Sure, and you'll be a part of that discussion for certain. And most of the time I have been on this board, contingencies have been in place, because then you don't have to come running back if it's just slightly over or whatever. So maybe partly too, we look at the amount of a contingency, if we have it, is this what other communities are doing for contingencies? And how else it might work if we didn't do a contingency, but I think that belongs in GGF.
But I understand that we're trying to save times, the way projects go sometimes, that, okay, we need another $5,000. We don't have time to go back to the committee. That just should make us plan more ahead and manage our projects internally so we don't get surprised by that. So I'm just forcing it back internally that we need to manage this closer without this contingency.
I think in some cases, like, road projects where you're dealing with quantities, there's ways to accomplish that. On a project like this, where we're talking about, parts and materials and facilities upgrades, that would be a little more difficult if there was something that was unforeseen in the project. So, but I think the discussion would be great. I'd be happy to participate in that.
Matt, check your math on that. The dollar amount you want for contingency is 4.7%. I'm just saying, I just want to make sure your numbers are what you want.
Any further discussion?
You sound like an accountant.
Bill?
No,
Just one comment. This is gonna go, this has to be approved by village board too, so we can, bring it up there and, talk about the contingency again.
I still think it should go through GGF.
Yeah, and I think
appropriate.
GGF can look at, the whole thing. Staff also has authorization to approve up to a certain dollar amount.
I think if we look at it in detail at GGF, this will go through, obviously through the village board, not on a consent agenda. At least I don't think it should be with that price tag. I don't think the contingency should be the topic of discussion for that,
Right.
because we have to get this done, obviously. Any further discussion? Hearing none? We'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
One in opposition, and that be trustee Warren. Okay, let's see, fourth. Moving on, award of professional services agreement with Foth for an amount not to exceed $100,000 for construction administration inspection services related to generator replacements at well 2 and 7.
So these are the same projects with Foth serving as the inspector and doing the construction admin. The fee is not to exceed $50,000. In both instances, they're substantially similar projects. The reason that we're continuing with Foth is they've had kind of a long history with this particular project. It started out where it was going to be done under the general services contract, and they'd done the majority of the work and the design under that agreement, but we decided that it needed to be publicly bid. So they repackaged everything to get it through public bid. And now I think that they've been working on it this long, it makes sense to continue with Foth.
Committee?
Well, I just have a comment that, when I looked at this, the whole project is under $400,000 and we have $100,000 in inspection fees for that. That seems high to me.
That's 26% of the construction cost. That's very high.
It is high. I think, there's value there and it is also not to exceed. So on the high end, it's 100,000. If you look at the proposal that's attached, they actually give it a range, starting, I think, at, like 44,000 on both of them. Well, that would be 88. I don't disagree that, and I figured that this might come up. I think that there, especially in the water utility where Foth has been doing a lot of the work, where we have new projects now that don't have the history that some of these kind of legacy projects that were around before I was the director here. They don't have that attachment to what's been done in the past, that we can be more proactive in getting proposals.
So we wouldn't want to get bids on this? You wouldn't be comfortable with that?
I think we're proposing it as is on the item tonight, just because of some of that history. I think for future projects that come up with the water utility, we'd go get those proposals because of, some of the things that we're seeing here.
Bob?
I don't have a problem with Foth doing it. It makes perfect sense to me. If you have the designer on board to do the inspect, got the continuity and familiarity. And for that reason, I would expect that their bids do that work would be less. I expect something in the ballpark of 10% instead of 26%. That's been my history in the industry. So if I saw something at like 40,000, yeah, I would approve that, but I'm not going to approve this. This is way too high.
Well, you can make a motion to send this back. I mean, they can sharpen their pencil, or we can, I agree, it sounds high, especially when you look at the percentage of it. And I think we're all uncomfortable with that, and that maybe is a message we should send to Foth.
I agree.
I'll entertain a motion to maybe send this back to Foth for a review.
I'll make a motion to Request that both prepare another proposal based upon the concerns that we had that their original bid was.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Eric, anything? Bill?
I just want to say that at $200 an hour, that's 500 hours worth of work.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
just putting
It's too generous.
two generators.
I mean, that's why I'm like, I don't have your background. I'm thinking 2 generators. How can it cost that much?
I don't see a lot of I mean, I'm not a water guy. I don't see a lot of variability here, putting in 2 generators. It's not like.
Yeah, the generators are by far the biggest part of the scope, but there's like an enclosure that we're dealing with and some other things ancillary to the generators. I don't disagree that, when you look at the percentages, it sounds high. And that's why I think, in this case, it sounds like we will be getting some proposals, or at least going back to Foth and trying to get them to sharpen their pencils a little bit. But
Let's see if they can, Matt, and with the idea that, committee with experience thinks it's too high. And we obviously would like them to do this project, but if they can't, and we have to go look elsewhere, I think that would be okay with me. And with the committee.
Hey, Matt, when you go back to them on their basis of payment, they have like a lump sum, a cost not to exceed, and there's something else. And then they have an other column, and the other column just reads like a not time and material not to exceed. So I don't know why they went to the other column when they could have used one of their existing boxes. So it just made me question it a little bit as far as what they're doing with the basis of payment. Not a big deal, but
yeah.
Well, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous to send it back. Next on the agenda, discussion of planned rural street tree pruning and removal project on Mary Booth, Oakwood Drive, Highland, and potentially additional streets in the village over the late fall and winter.
So this is a rural street tree project that's aimed at doing a few things in the locations that's mentioned. First is to clean up the right of way along these roads. I've got some pictures if you want to see them later that show how branches and brush are really encroaching on the right of way in that area. We're also looking to get branches that are hanging over the road and then to open up vision triangles, especially around corners. It's probably not well known, but we had a really difficult time plowing in this area
Oh, yeah.
on that January 9th storm way back at the beginning of this year. That there were so many branches and so much brush, and the weight of the snow made it. So our crews were out there sawing and cutting branches in the middle of the night. And that's just a result of very mature trees and a lot of shrub kind of moving in over time. And it's probably a little overdue for maintenance. So this would be an operation that would be done by village staff, but we'd also be working in coordination with the We Energies contractor, who's also planning work in that area for power line reliability. They'll be going through and, topping trees that are getting in lines, and you look at some of the pictures that I have later, you can see that too.
Who's topping the trees?
The contractor for We Energies.
Okay, not our village. Okay.
No, but there are cases, and maybe I will pull up the pictures where you can see some of the types of things. Actually, before I do that, I wanted to show you one unique thing about the property lines and the right of way out there. There's a number of areas where we have established right of way, and property lines kind of go up to the right of way, and then there's that 15, 20, whatever it is, feet of space of right of way. There's other areas out there where the property goes out to the middle of the road, and we have what's called prescriptive rights in order to do maintenance. And that's usually 33 feet off the road. So we run into this.
Off the center line.
Off the center line, I'm sorry. So this condition exists in a couple different places along Mary Booth, along some of the other roads that are mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's just something that will require us to do a little more coordination with citizens. So in order to get the project started, we'll be sending out a communication to everybody that's affected in the area, and then have them contact us if there's issues, and we'll work through kind of, you know, tree by tree in some cases, because there's trees that are, you know, right on the border of being private or public, and there's,
Matt, it's 15 feet from the center line normally, if it's not the 30-foot thing?
it's
Would
very,
that be the normal?
that's, yeah, I mean, it's in that range. It varies all over the village. but-
Okay, from the center line? Wow, should let them take down my two
But you
trees.
never know what you're gonna run into.
So here's just a few pictures of, let me go back to the beginning here, and these got a little grainy, I'm sorry about that, but you can see how we've got branches really hanging over the road pretty dramatically. We've got shrubs that are really right up to the edge of the asphalt in some cases. And then you've got, you know, the power line running down one side of this road. That's where, you know, in working with We Energies and their contractor, they might do something to this tree that makes it look substantially less attractive by the time they're done with it. And then it might be advantageous for us to clean that up.
Mhm.
And there might be cases with, you know, some of these trees kind of mixed in here where we do some work and we come to some agreements with property owners on how to deal with this. But the end goal is to clean this up, back off the shrubs and brush in the right of way, and get those branches that are hanging over the road pretty dramatically. Here's just a few more examples. Like you can see all this growing up into the power lines. That's stuff that We Energies will deal with, but you can also see it, you know, pretty dramatically coming over the road. The shrubs again that would need to be knocked back within the right of way.
Yeah, We Energies generally does come through about every, I want to say, 6 to 8 years. And they, you know, come to the door and say what they're going to do. So you're going to coordinate with them in that same way, so
Yep.
they will let us know,
Yeah,
okay?
the plan is to be out there working with them through the project. And here's just a few more examples. You can see, you know, the brush and shrub kind of moving in, and here we're really close to an over the road. Again, the shrubs just real close to the edge of the pavement. Then here's a case where, you know, we would probably want to clear back a ways in order to clean up that vision triangle. It's really,
That's a tough corner. I have to live on Mary Booth Lane. It's my tree you're not touching, but, but no, we desperately need this. We have had, my neighbors are getting very irritated. We have had so many dead trees come down in the road, blocking traffic, so you have to turn and go around the other way. We call the police, have to wait for somebody to come out. It's probably every windstorm, we have at least one tree go down. And not even looking at winter. So I think there are a lot of dead ash that are leaning over the road that might even be on private property. But the leaning part isn't, so we have to probably take care of it anyway. And I think this is long overdue and much needed to clean this area up, and I think you'll get a lot of neighbor support for it.
so just one other detail about, it's in the agenda item, but kind of how we wanted to progress through is the Mary Booth, Highland and Oakwood. That would be kind of the first phase. And then if we had time over the course of the winter, that could transition down to Willow Creek and to Old Mequon and even a portion of Freistadt. But the letters that we're going to be sending out will be focused on that segment right now. If we
Mhm.
do have time and there's not terrible winter weather this season,
Mhm.
and we're able to do more of this maintenance, then we would do the communication with the other areas.
And I think too, at that corner of Highland coming on to Mary Booth is very difficult because people do come around that very sharp turn very quickly. And all that brush on the property on that corner, you don't have a sight line. You're already around the corner and then there's somebody walking there. Lots of people walk on this road. So to get that cleaned up, I think would be really a great idea.
So if there's no other questions or comments, our plan moving forward would be to send out that letter to get the communication with residents started and start working through, any issues that we need to with the residents and communicate more directly about the plan. The work would start, over the late fall here and into the winter.
Is that stated in the letter, late fall and into winter?
I believe it is.
Yeah, good. It should be, I hope. And also that is a number where they can call if they have questions. And you'll be in touch with them prior to descending on their property, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the letter would be the first part.
Yeah.
And then,
It'd be nice to know, like, just a general time frame of when you're coming.
we can,
So you need from us?
don't need anything. It was just kind of a
Informational?
informational and for
Okay.
discussion. There's been a little bit of a history with tree projects in the recent past and wanted to make sure that everybody was on board and familiar with the project before we proceeded and address any major concerns that you had.
Yeah, it's much needed, and I'm glad we're addressing this.
Phil has a question.
So, so just for my own clarification, please. So the we entered in a normal environment, We Energies does their own tree thing separate from the village, correct? We are just going there with them because for some reason that has been neglected. And once we get the past cleaned up, there will be the We Energies efforts, which we have nothing to do with, and the village efforts, which we are solely responsible for.
Correct.
We do not intermingle those two.
In this case, the coordination worked out. It doesn't necessarily work out in every instance. And you've seen trees actually in this area where We Energies has done work and
Mhm.
the village wasn't following along that are topped off pretty severely. But yeah, I think, where it makes sense and we know that they're going to be working and we have maintenance that we know we need to do, it makes some sense to work together.
Thank you.
Bob?
Matt, does it matter, it's on private property or right away as far as how you approach tree?
For sure. When it comes down to it in the ordinance, we have the ability to deal with any private tree that's affecting the right of way. But, if we were talking about, Terry mentioned ash trees that are leaning over pretty severely and could impact the right of way. I think that's where the conversations would need to be had with the property owner or the resident to say since we're here, this is going to be an issue for us in the future. It makes sense for us to deal with it now.
So that leads me to my next question, and you know what I'm going to ask. Who's establishing the right-of-way line out there? Because it all comes down to, you're going to have property owners saying, this is on my property. I don't want you on my property to do this. Although you state there, we still have an out on that, but how are we going to establish the right-of-way line out there?
I mean, we use the GIS for measuring right of way off of either the edge of the pavement or the center line, so we can get pretty accurate measurements on where that is. Now, it's inevitable that there's going to be gray area,
Yeah,
and there's going to be a tree that's a third of the trunk is in the right of way and a third is on the private property, and those are just going to be the issues that we have to work through.
yeah, that's close enough for what we're doing here. I'm just concerned, like one of your pictures, you had a nice looking white fence.
Yep.
Now we may find out that that's on right of way, and there's a tree on the other side of the fence that really should be addressed and that we should address it. Are we going to?
I think
Leap
that was
over that
one of the
fence?
reasons for that picture is I think that is likely the case, that there's trees on the other side of that fence that need to be
Yeah.
addressed. So, that's going to take a different level of care, obviously, because we've got that fence that we have to work around.
Last point I want to make is that, so the portion that we, the village, do, we're following our tree master plan, the T, right? We spent a
Yeah.
lot of time on that and how we're going to do this.
The comprehensive tree plan talks about rural tree maintenance. And it does, if you remember, it kind of divided tree maintenance into two different areas. The urban would be largely contracted for maintenance, and the rural would be generally staff. And then it outlines that we would identify priority areas that would need rural tree maintenance, and contemplates that we would have a plan similar to, you know, kind of the first phase of a plan here of roads that we would need to work through for that rural tree maintenance. And then obviously we would follow the communication protocols and stuff like that that were established in the plan.
I don't think our plan addressed it in that kind of detail, but I agree with you. The rural maintenance of trees is more of a safety issue, and it's not an aesthetic issue. And I don't know if the public is going to get that if you're trimming the heck out of my tree on my property, or if you don't get there in time, because We Energies could care less about what it looks like. It's just we want our cables to be free and minimize the chance of heavily laden branches falling on our cables. So, well, there's not going to be much left, in my opinion, once We Energy gets done with a tree for us to try to make it look right. So I'm just being the devil's advocate. We're going
Yeah.
to run into that.
Yeah, and in some of those cases, you know, the tree probably comes down if it's
Yep.
topped off to the point where there's really nothing left of it, because We Energies won't finish the job. You know, once it's below the lines, like you said, they're not going to care. They've accomplished their task.
Yeah.
That's where we'd work with the resident on that.
Actually, in my opinion, it'd be better just to do this without We Energies. Because it's not as much a We Energies problem as it is the brush and the encroachment of the dead ash and all the junk coming into the road on the opposite side mostly, except that corner. It's very clean on one side for the most part, but whatever. I mean, as long as it's cooperative and everybody's there, I think you're gonna find there are so many dead top trees in a couple of these yards where they probably can't afford to take them down because it's not cheap. And so there's these big ugly totem poles just standing there because We Energies comes in and just cuts them to the 10-foot level and walks away.
My focus is vision triangles. That's where your greatest risk is. When drivers can't see what's going around the corner, or if you're at an intersection and you can't see traffic coming. I don't know if we've got easements for vision triangles on our roads.
I think the ordinance allows for whatever we need to do in terms of clearing the vision triangle.
Those could be platted, you know, to give us more power, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the case.
Late for that in that neighborhood. It's like 150 years old. 1995. Anyway, any more discussion? We done with this? Okay, moving on. Approval to purchase a replacement 20 horsepower submersible sewage pump at Lift Station 7 in the amount of $23,585.
So this is a replacement of a pump that has been around since 1993. It's a very old pump. It's been overhauled a couple different times, actually 3 times over that period of time. And at this point, 31 years into its service life, it's not cost effective really to be rebuilding it anymore. So we're looking to purchase the pump.
Committee?
Move approval of the purchase of a replacement 20 horsepower submersible sewage pump from Flight USA for Lift Station 7 in the amount of $23,585.60.
Second.
Is this staff going to install this?
Tim, did you hear that question?
I didn't see any cost besides this, so
This
I
is the
assume
part
so.
cost, yeah.
I had to see you did the numbers to see what's most cost effective.
Any further discussion? We'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Finally, moving on to acceptance of improvements, Kellertown 9 water main.
So a while back, we accepted the improvements for the sanitary, and we're bringing it forward for acceptance of the water main now. And just a side note about acceptance of infrastructure generally. I think we'd probably been out of the habit of that in Public Works of bringing those items to the committee. But those are really the way that we kind of kick in warranty periods based on our contracts. So I'm anticipating that over the course of the next several months, you'll see more of these types of items come across where we're looking to accept the work that was done, like for instance, the paving program this year and accepting those improvements and so on.
Okay, committee,
Question.
go ahead, Bob.
So this begins the one-year warranty period. Are we still retaining money after we do this approval?
Typically, the developer has a letter of credit on file. So we have some ability to go back and make adjustments. Kevin might be a little bit more familiar with the exact financial instrument that we have to go back and make any maintenance or improvements that are needed. I don't know, Kevin, if,
One-year warranty, that's all well and good, but if there's no bite to it,
yeah.
it's tough to get a contractor back if you're not holding money on them.
Yeah, typically until, at least until they're accepted, in some cases beyond, we hold a certain amount in a letter of credit or some other instrument.
Yeah, good evening. In this case, with the developer, in contrast to a contractor where we would have retainage, Matt's correct that it's a letter of credit is the financial instrument.
Okay,
Thank you, Kevin.
any further comments? We'll vote. All in favor?
I don't think we have.
Oh,
a
you don't
motion.
have a motion? Well, come on, guys.
I vote in favor of the motion. Whatever it is. Let's see.
Motion to approve motion to approve the water utilities recommendation to accept the improvements as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. And that brings us to director's report.
All right, we're moving along really well here. I'll just make a few comments on the director's report. Looking at the items that are highlighted in green, we're starting, actually kind of finishing work on identifying roads for the 2025 road program and actually anticipating that in December, we'll have a 10-year road program and 5-year seal coat program to present to all of you. But staff is working on that. Our engineer, Joe, has been working on the beginning parts of the design for Division Road, including creating removal plans, doing some preliminary survey and locates. So that is progressing.
Matt,
At
if
some
I could
point,
Interrupt you real
Yep.
quick. So the first item you have is the intersection, or maybe you don't, maybe I'm looking at this wrong. You've got the Lannon intersection and Maple intersection in here somewhere?
probably down
Yeah, it's
in,
work by other agencies. It's the top
Yep.
item.
I apologize. Okay, sorry.
no problem. That third item, I already talked about that, so we'll be bringing the 10-year road program and 5-year seal coat plan hopefully in December. Moving down, Rupert and Milky Facilities Study Amendment. So last month, the amendment to make some changes to the sanitary sewer service area and the facilities plan study area were awarded to Rupert and Milky, and they're beginning that now. They're also starting another study that was awarded to them. That's the evaluation of Main Street and Old Farm lift stations to get a better handle on exactly what will be needed for those facilities for future upgrades.
Okay.
We just met with them last week to kick that effort off. The public safety building additional scope, that's going to be presented later tonight. So stay tuned on that one. Impact fees, working with the village administrator and Ehlers on recommendations for revisions to impact fees. The administrator is working on the whole range of impact fees. Where Public Works is involved is the water impact fees and the sewer connection fees. Then getting on to the Lannon and Maple intersection, that is in progress. It's been kind of slowly in progress. If you remember, there were some long lead times on the traffic control equipment. And that's what was pushing this out so long. We're still in a holding pattern, waiting for that to come in and for the contractor to mobilize and get it installed.
When we last spoke, we're waiting for those signal standards and light standards. That's the big lead time, right?
Yes,
Are you still thinking by the end of this year that's up? and running?
hopeful for the end of the year. Yes.
You had any crashes out there because of these temporary signals? Because they don't line up very well with the lanes.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I've had some complaints. Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving down, we submitted a draft application for our MS4 permit and working with the DNR on some changes and modifications to tasks or commitments that the village will need to make over the next 5 years as that draft permit becomes a final permit, and then we're locked into different responsibilities. And then just some quick department updates. Furniture in DPW engineering is going to be replaced starting next week. It'll actually be a fairly quick job, but you may notice that if you're around Village Hall with stuff coming in and out. The asset manager position that's in the budget, provided that the budget is adopted with that position in it, will get posted sometime in late November or early December so we can begin recruitment. So that is, I think, an exciting thing to look forward to. The fourth item in this area, water lateral letters to be distributed to residents with unknown service line materials. I wanted to spend just a second on this one. So in 2021, the federal government changed lead and copper rules that pushed down to the state a requirement that they identify all lead service laterals in the state. And now the village subsequently is responsible for identifying the lead service laterals in the village. We don't expect that there are any, but we have approximately 800 or so laterals that have an unknown material type. And because they're classified as unknown, a letter is going to be sent out to those residents that asks for their assistance in identifying the material type. So I've got a copy of the letter that's going to be going out shortly. And I think communication is key with this one because we really don't anticipate that there are lead service laterals. And that's very clear in the first paragraph of this letter, but it's inevitably going to be things, it's going to be the first thing that people ask when they get it is, oh my goodness, I have a lead service lateral. Well, we don't expect that. So this breaks out, what is your service lateral? What section of it is the village responsible for? Is the homeowner responsible for? And then the in-house plumbing. And then it asks the residents to take a survey. And I can click on that link and they're going to go to a website where they fill in some information related to their property, when it was built. It has a guide and then a video that assists them in identifying the service line and the material type. So here's some descriptions of material types, and then they can take some pictures of it and they can send this in. So ultimately what this does is we update our records and the state has a better understanding of where any lead laterals exist. But the deadline, and all municipalities are dealing with this right now, or many of them, is coming up. So the letter actually will need to get out the door here by the end of the week. We're anticipating that there's going to be a fairly high volume of calls based on sending this letter out. So we've set up kind of a hotline number for people to leave messages with their concerns, and also a standalone email address where they can email any concerns or questions that they have about this. When it comes down to it, our hands are kind of tied, and this is a requirement from the federal government, pushed down to the state, pushed down to us. And we really feel like it doesn't affect us, but we're not getting the warm and fuzzies that that will be exempted from this requirement.
How do you test for it again to see?
You just look at the material, so, you know, the
How do you
pictures,
look at it though? You just, I mean, if it's in somebody's,
we don't.
okay.
If it comes to that eventually, then yeah, we would have to do inspections, but right now the letter is requesting that residents
Just take a
perform this
look.
themselves.
Take a look,
And,
okay?
yeah, use the guides, these
Mhm.
pictures, the YouTube video, and then these descriptions of the different pipe material that could be used to help identify it.
Oh, boy.
I appreciate
Yeah, exactly.
your effort on that exhibit. Prior to seeing that you had pictures on there, I would have said 75% of the people do not know what a water lateral is, and 95% don't know lead compared to copper.
Right.
So this gets you a lot higher in your percentages, but is it a guarantee that when they're looking at the pipe that comes into their basement, that that means that's what the lateral out to the main is also made out of? Is that guarantee, Paul? Is that how it works?
I think there's certainly if it's more likely than not that it carries through, but it's not 100%. And we could be required at some point in the future to like look at the village-owned portion of the lateral and have the resident look at their portion and identify them independently. Some utilities, if I understood Paul right in our discussions, are actually going through that effort now. I think that's probably premature though.
When did lead stop being installed? And what's the oldest lateral that we have in this village? I was under the understanding
Downtown.
we had no lead.
Yeah, and we feel we don't. But again, the state looks at our unknown material type
Yeah.
and says that is potentially lead. So,
So all you have to do is send this out, but we don't have to tally anything for the government or, I mean, what happens if people don't respond to you? Or,
yeah, I think there's going to be a fairly low response to the letter.
so what do you do?
We'll
Just-
use whatever information comes back to update our records. But for those that don't respond, I mean, it's just going to remain that way, and we'll wait for the
Mhm.
DNR to advise us on a
Okay,
different approach.
it's one of those projects, okay. Okay. In the interest of time, anything else, Matt, or can we close out here and set a new meeting date?
We can close it out.
Okay, let's see, our next meeting would normally be, does Tuesday work, or do you prefer Wednesday?
What?
It would be, how about you, Tuesday or Wednesday preference?
The only thing I would say is that the meetings, like in the system, are usually set up for Wednesday.
Oh, that's
so-
fine. Wednesday, the 8th? Does that work for you? Oh, I'm sorry, the 4th, you're right, I'm in January already. Does the 4th work for everyone? 5:30, this meeting room, okay? And with that, we will close this meeting out at 6:23 PM. Thank you, everyone. You want to hit the button? Thanks. Hmm.